Thank you, and thank you for asking me here to talk about a subject that's really dear to my soul, and that is recovery. Recovery is one of those things that nobody ever asks about, and it's really the thing you should be asking about. Because there's a lot of information out there about preparedness, and you're going to, from your speaker series, I see you're going to have some great presentations on that. But when it comes to recovery, you're still going to be dealing with recovery issues 10, 15, 20 years from now. And I just told a story just a few minutes ago where at the Northridge earthquake, I ended up defending some information that had been presented in the 1971 Sylmar earthquake. So thank you for having me here. Recovery is just so important, and it's often overlooked. So this is our office. This is who we are. We are part of the Chief Executive Office, and our office our building is over on Eastern in East LA. And basically, we do a lot of planning, a lot of big level planning, not so much the tactical, but we do a lot of strategic planning with all of the other partners and cities in the county. We do some operations. We operate the Emergency Operations Center, but we also have a couple of centers that we will roll when in a disaster. We do a tremendous amount of training. We do a tremendous amount of public education, and then we do have some technical operations. We have a couple of proprietary software, or not proprietary, but we have a couple of software things that we use as tools when we do emergency planning, emergency preparedness. So that's just a little bit about us. And we are working with everybody in the area. So it's not just county agencies we're working with nonprofits and everybody who's in LA County. This is kind of an old chart there. I think FEMA's updated it now and they've put in a fancier one, but this is the old tried and true. Basically, this is a cycle. You never really get out of one of these pieces. They continue round and round and round. And recovery is just such a great example of that. Recovery goes on for years and years and years. I've never worked a disaster where 5 years wasn't the minimum for recovery. And that was not that great of a big disaster. So one of the things that in putting this together, I'll just cop to this right away. I broke a lot of PowerPoint rules. I knew the information I wanted to present, and you'll have this information. I am going to provide it afterwards, so if you want to do a printed copy, that's great. But I really wanted to get to the ideas here, and I just put too small of a font on too few slides. But what we're really talking about here is, what do we expect? What do we know that's going to happen? And one of the things that people really like to do is really talk about, oh, well, this is going to fail, and that's going to fail, and what systems are going to be there, and I'm not going to be able to get cash, and my babysitter won't be there, and the schools are going to be closed. All the different things that people catastrophize about, right? All of the things that they anticipate. But the truth of it is, you don't know what's going to happen. You really don't know where that impact is going to be. So in the Northridge earthquake, I'll never forget my sister-in-law telling me, oh, I just went to my job interview. Her job interview was in LA County on the south side. Northridge was way over there. She wasn't affected at all. So one of the big things about recovery is to know that your systems are going to fail. Understand what those systems are, but then don't get too wrapped up in everything's going to be gone, everything's going to be dead, nothing's going to be available to me. Some things will be available to you. Some things will be brought back online fairly shortly, but there will be an impact, and you do need to figure out what that is going to be. So how many systems are going to fail? What plans are in place? What are other plans? What's your workplace plan? What's your spouse's workplace plan? What is the school's plan that has your child? What's your babysitter's idea of recovery? What are all of the people that you're dependent on, all the systems that you're dependent on, what are they going to do? Because all of their plans are going to impact you. So I like this. Go and ask people what their plans are. Let's freak everybody out. How the priorities are important. So to you, right now, you're thinking, this is my number one priority because I don't have someplace to sleep tonight. That priority may not be as highly ranked as you think. Because if I can get you into a shelter for the night, I figure you're safe enough for right now. My priority is doing search and rescue for the folks that are still troubled or still endangered. So one of the biggest problems that you get in recovery all the time is, what are the priorities that you have and what are others' priorities and how do they impact what you're going to do? This is huge. Who will have the loudest voice? Come on, everybody's got a group like that, right? The one who talks loudest and most often is the one who gets their issue dealt with. In a post-disaster environment, that is amplified. As if it wasn't squeaky enough, it will be deafening, because everybody will have an opinion as to how it ought to be and how it ought to go. And you, because you just happen to be more retiring, more quiet, are going to get overlooked for a very good, important point. So that has a big impact. What do others think about where we live? So now all of a sudden you find out that you're not the priority you thought for recovery. Why? That's just not that important an area. You may think it's cute, but it doesn't really rank. We're going to put our money over here. Or then this is a good one for Whittier. After the '87 quake, when they lost a lot of single-family homes, people came in and started building multifamily homes or residences. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Everybody who still was there said, well, you can't do that. This is a quaint single-family home, walkable neighborhood. Well, not according to the people that were trying to do that, to do recovery in a different way. Excuse me. So you have to understand that these are all going to happen. How stressful will this be? You can be a rock. You can be a rock. You can get up. You can do it every day. You can keep this under control. And then somebody's going to ask you for a stick of gum. And y'all lose it. Dade County, Hurricane Andrew, the stories, and I'll just say it right out loud, the suicide rate among children was incredibly high. And one of them was, when they started to flip, was crazy things like they handled the schools not being open. They handled the living in a different place, sleeping on sofas and not having all their things. But as soon as she couldn't get a curling iron, all bets were off. And it's funny, but it's not funny. And so that stress, you need to factor that in when you're building your plans, when you're thinking about how you're going to go forward. You have to understand you can't avoid stress, and neither can anybody around you. And then how are we going to define recovery? Because is recovery, you're back at work and the roads are good enough for you to get to work and back again? You can't go to your normal market, but you have another market? Or is recovery, what did you have before, and is it back again? So you have to really go through and define this and understand that what they like to call the new normal is what you'll end up with. You will not have the same thing after a big disaster as you had going in. So that was a lot for that slide. But those are the questions I'd like you to ask. In preparedness, I always tell people it's not rocket science, but if you could just go off and think through those things, I think you'll figure out how to handle it. Recovery is the same way. Think about it. Understand what you're going to be faced with, and that'll help. So when we look at recovery priorities from the government perspective and from my office, this is kind of generally what we look at. We're looking at our infrastructure. Are we able to continue offering services? Are we operational? Are we still able to provide the things that we need to provide that our residents need? A good example of that is, how the fire trucks pull out and they inspect the building to make sure that that's okay. That was a post-Northridge thing. Families and households. Are our families and households stable? Do they have transportation routes? Are they getting food? Do they have basic sanitation, transportation, and utilities? And then third is business stabilization and resumption. So now if you were a small business owner, you wouldn't be too excited about that, right? Because now we're talking about priorities. And you're saying, wait a minute, hang on. Some of my contractors are government agencies, and they're people who need my services. It's true, but you have to at some point commit yourself to something. And so this is how we tend to look at it. Assistance program. This is very important. So you heard my background. I was a consultant, did it for a number of years, worked all over the United States, which was great because it funded my trips to Europe and Australia. They are not what you think they are. Everybody thinks, here comes FEMA, they're going to come in and supply this assistance. FEMA's job is not to put you back to where you were. FEMA's job is to make sure that you're stable. And their understanding of their programs is about that deep and about that extensive. So you have to understand what those are intended to do before you get upset that $3,000 isn't going to fix your life. It is really not intended to fix your life. There's very limited direct financial assistance. Most direct financial assistance you're going to get is frankly from the nonprofit agencies. That's my pitch for them. Go, volunteer. No, I'm serious. I mean, one of the biggest ones we have in LA County, their US headquarters is here, is the Zushi Foundation, which is a Buddhist foundation. They're one of the few I can tell you will give you a check. And in fact, in Hurricane Sandy, I think they're up to something like $60 million in cash that they've distributed. So they're very limited. Don't even expect very much, and what you do get, be grateful for. And most of it will require, at least on the government side, that you apply for a loan first. So you'll always have to do the SBA paperwork in order to get your FEMA grant, assuming that it's available. So that's another point that I want to say now, so afterwards you can say, you know, I kind of remember somebody saying that. Assistance from nonprofits, again, I cannot stress enough how important they are. I can't stress enough how important it is that they be involved in planning and that we know and understand what they're willing to do, what they can do. And then let's just go one step further. I can't stress enough how it would be great if you all got involved in that, because nonprofits don't work like they used to. Red Cross doesn't work like it used to. There are fewer volunteers that work for those. There are fewer people that can say that they were a 60-year Red Cross volunteer. I happen to know one of those people. It's just not the same thing. And so the new models and the new ideas about what's out there really need contributions from people who expect to be using those services. And then we get to the core, and this is where I start really breaking the rules. So if you start looking at recovery, really we're talking about these 4 areas, right? Physical, governmental, social, and economic. That's how I'm going to divide it, because those are the only ways you can really kind of get a handle on how pervasive this is going to be. So this is your neighborhood now. You know where your fire station is, you know the streets are all safe, and this is where your forests and you know recreation, and your house kind of looks like that. My house doesn't look anything like that. This is the next day. That's what your road looks like. That thing wasn't on fire last night, even though the earthquake was last week. And you still have these all over the place. You still have all these cracks. Now, what does that crack even mean, right? You don't even know what that means, because you know that means something underneath moved, but you don't really understand what the implications of that are going to be. So this is what your neighborhood starts to look like. And then what I look at this crack going straight up to that house, and I think, what damage did that house have? Now, I can live in it. Right now, it's usable, it's workable, but I don't really know what that's going to look like when I get a contractor in there. This one is a really devastating one. The neighborhood's up high, but this is several different houses up on the right, on the bottom, and then the famous red tags. If you've been through an earthquake, you've seen the red tags. That gets put on your door. It is an unsafe place, and you will find neighborhoods covered in them at points. So, Earth is no longer shaking. We know that, right? Because this is recovery we're talking about. I'm not talking about what it can do. I'm talking about what's happening right now. So, there's going to be some aftershocks, but for the most part, its ground is stopped. But a lot of roads are closed. A lot of transportation routes have altered. You can't get some places. Forget about the shortcuts you once had, but even more to the point, whatever roads are open are closing frequently. Big equipment is coming in, so you're constantly being asked to be patient. You're constantly being asked to take an hour what used to take you 15 minutes, because this is going to be a rolling issue as everybody does that. There's a lot of debris on smaller streets and in private homes. So private property debris is different than debris on public property, right? So anybody who is elderly, not maybe young, maybe just not mobile, maybe just hasn't gotten around to it because there's too many other problems, has debris in their front yard still. So it's pretty actually disconcerting, right? Every time you drive down this street, it still looks like the disaster happened 20 seconds ago. But it's really just taking some people a lot longer to get to that recovery place. Utilities are uncertain. Now this is going to be one of those things where you're talking about high impact areas, medium impact areas, and the no impact areas. But everybody's going to get hit with uncertain technologies and uncertain utilities, electrical, internet. I think internet was the one that sets people off now. The parks are still a mess because you know what? The disaster's over and you're okay. You're still in your house. But the park still has a shelter operation going on. The park still has a local assistance center. I'll talk about that in a sec. The park has things that they're using because they need that space to provide stuff for citizens. So even though it's okay, you're not okay because now you have your 11-year-old boy who can't play Little League and now you're trying to figure out how to beat that energy out of him, right? So it's not the same. I always remember at the Malibu fires, our agency came in and used their park facility for a recovery center. And I felt so horrible because that is the only place they had to put on their haunted house. So here you are trying to recover a community, but you can't recover their normal things. So it gets tough. Strangers, stranger danger, big time. Strangers are everywhere. Some guy put on a badge and he wants to look at your foundation. Another is coming around and looking at your utilities. There are so many strangers, insurance companies, utility, mutual aid packs that come from other places. People, maybe not somebody from my office, but people from government agencies who are looking at one thing or another. So it becomes very disconcerting to have your neighborhood really invaded by strangers. And then new hazards. Oh, we were okay yesterday, but today we have a boil water alert in this sector. And then you go running to the internet or to your television or whatever to see if you're in that sector. All sorts of new hazards. Oh, we didn't realize it, but now there's XYZ that's gone airborne. Or you remember the cough part after Northridge? Remember that dust caused that respiratory valley cough or whatever they're calling it. It's a respiratory problem. That stuff comes up weekly. They don't necessarily figure it out right away, but as things progress and everybody start getting back on track, that happens. This one, the one that says State Farm there, I drove through this neighborhood. That's not my picture, but I drove through one of these neighborhoods, and I'm telling you, you go through and every house on it was spray painted with their insurance number and a phone number as to where the resident could be found. You want to talk to me about my neighborhood look different today? That was a total example of that. This is actually Katrina. This is one of the Katrina pictures here. And then up there, that's actually Altadena, Pasadena. That was a house fire. So, if you lived in that area, it certainly looked different today than it did yesterday. And this is actually the tsunami in Japan. This is Sendai. And this picture blew me away. I just couldn't, I can't even imagine. Talk about no landmarks. How do you even understand that? I mean, I think your brain just goes on a holiday for that one. Oh yeah, it was Japan. So now this one, this is another one too, the government preparedness or government plans, government recovery. So what we're doing, one of the first things we're doing is setting priorities. We're looking at the biggest bang for the effort at some point. We're looking at life safety is primary, and we're looking at things that can be evenly distributed, right? We can't be, inequity and injustice, which I'm going to talk about in a minute or two, but inequity and injustice are always accusations that happen. So what we're doing, we're constantly looking to see what priorities are going to suit the circumstances and be most appropriate. Struggling to provide essential services, we're affected. We're affected because our staff isn't coming into the office. We're affected because our buildings aren't able to house them. And we're affected because delivering services to residents is not the same as it was 2 days ago. So there's a lot of that going on. And there's a lot of new type coordination and things that I didn't do that yesterday, but today, for some reason, I'm in charge of understanding where donated goods are going. So there's a lot of changes in how we're struggling with what we're doing now. Meetings, press conferences, meeting after meeting, conference after conference, dueling press conferences. Did that one apply to me? Did media even go to that one? Those become just absolutely crazy. And every agency, every mayor, every council member, every city, every fire agency, all of them are being asked, and a good number of them are actually coming up and talking about some of these issues. Talking to community, okay, now we'll take it, even looking on a little longer than just right away. Now we're talking to community groups, right? I'm out here talking to you, this is really a preparedness thing, right? But if I go out after, I'm talking to community groups and we're talking about what are we gonna do about your neighborhood? How are we gonna change this? What are we gonna do to make it workable again? I looked all over for a picture, I could not find one, and probably for good reason. After the Northridge earthquake, they had this thing called ghost towns. They were homes that had been, that they were upside down. They really didn't have a lot of equity. The owners didn't. It was a newer area. You remember the economy at that time. And when the homes got damaged, residents just left. They just left it behind. They left swimming pools full. They left refrigerators full. They left animals and pets running the neighborhood, and that's exactly what happened. All of a sudden, you started getting gangs of dogs. All of a sudden, you started having health problems with the pools and mosquitoes. And then worse, people started moving into vacant buildings. And suddenly you have a population in that neighborhood that was not there before. So one of the things in Northridge I remember distinctly was talking to community leaders, what are we going to do about this? Because one person in that whole neighborhood can't remain and be safe. So it becomes a big issue about what are we going to do and how are we going to approach this and how can we be respectful to our residents and what they've spent their life working for. The other thing that we're doing, of course, is our own setup, but we're setting up a lot of centers. I'll talk about that in a minute, and getting political support and assistance, because everybody has a brilliant idea, right? You can't run after every brilliant idea. You really have to boil it down into those few that are going to work. So this one I love. This is actually Katrina, but this just terrifies me. That is what a big shelter looks like. When I use this slide in another presentation, and the caption is, "You will be uncomfortable." But this is going to go on. If you have a considerable amount of damage to the housing stock, you're going to end up with some of this. You're going to end up with some of the tents. You're going to end up with some of these things. Then you're going to get your neighbor who got creative and can't really use the house, but they're just going to throw some tents and some information or some workable things on their property. They're going to camp at home. And to be honest, it's not necessarily a bad idea. In fact, to be honest, it's one of my chosen ones. But how long is this going to go on? And how long are you going to put up with that in your neighbor doing this? So there's a lot of issues that are going to look like what's going on. And then this one, of course, the famous FEMA trailer. I think that one was actually a private one, but the house was unlivable. So they just moved up something so they were on the property, because people get very concerned about the condition of their property. So now as government agencies, all three of those options are affecting us, right? It's public health, it's code, fire code, it's housing and doing centers, and regulating this. I mean, there's going to be a lot of new ordinances that are going to have to deal with something like this and how long that can last. So what it feels like. Remember I told you I was breaking some rules here? This is definitely one of those slides. What it feels like is this, and this is all of these things that I've heard over the years. I can't get any help. Every line is too long. Nobody's giving me the assistance. I don't even have to look at the slides. I remember them all. Nobody's giving me what I need. Yeah, you may be helping her over there, but I'm not getting what I need. There's so much information coming at me, I can't even tell it apart. It's too complex. Boring meetings, hard to understand information and materials, bureaucrats using words that are really works of art rather than plain language, strangers that care are coming into my neighborhood, looking at everything and telling me what to do. And why are they wasting their time on XYZ when obviously ABC is more important? And then everything is taking too long. That one comes back over and over and over again. Everything's taking too long. And this is one of the things we see. I love this one. This, if you can't read it, it says, FEMA hung up on me. They said they were busy, too busy to help. There's a lot of that. That's what you're going to see in the night. And okay, so you're not feeling great, right? Your home is damaged, and you're having a hard time getting to work, and you're having a hard time realigning your priorities and what's going on. And then you turn on the news, and that's what you see. And what do? Yeah, right. All those agencies are not here to help me. This is a bad situation. I'm going to yell and scream. Fine if that makes you happy, but I'm telling you now that won't solve the problem. And then these are actual pictures from different lines that you'll have to. That's just inevitable. Actually, that's me at the podium. Yeah, that was at Elizabeth Lake. What we did was we went up, and we do this all the time after a disaster. We went up to bring all the county agencies that could offer assistance to residents, and we set them up, and then we invite residents in to come and talk to people and find out what programs might be available to them. That's when I was talking about Malibu, that was what we were doing there. That one lasted several weeks. This one was just one day, but it was just not too long ago. But we're doing these things, so we're using a lot of staff to do these things. And there's other things. These are all the things that are going on. You don't need to know what they are. All you need to know is that probably all of those, and I love the post-it one, or those came up to my brain a little later, all of these things are what people are operating. After Katrina, did you see how many job expos there were? Every council member in the city of Los Angeles must have held a job fair. And that was great, and that's what we were doing, but it gets overwhelming. And if you need help, you just show up to any one of these. You don't actually care what they're doing there. All you want is help. And it's too hard, and this one had the shortest line, so that's why I'm here. But this gets very confusing. It gets very overwhelming. I don't know that there's a solution for that either. These are some of the agencies that that do a lot of recovery work. One of the ones I want to point out here, that's Zushi Foundation I talked about over there. But the one in the middle, those aren't government employees, those are residents. Those are residents who have circled around to help their neighborhood and to understand what they can do to assist their neighborhood. So they have the LACOE program where they put placards on door handles and things like that so they can begin to see what might be needed. But you know, we're doing more and more and more community preparedness that extends into recovery. Because after the disaster's over, when the dust settles a little bit, that doesn't mean everybody's starting off equal again or on a level playing field. There are still a lot of folks that need help. And you know them because they live next door to you. So that's just one of the programs. I wanted to be sure they were in here so I could make that comment. Social recovery, big one. So that was last week, that earthquake. What am I doing today? Well, public health and social services are coming back, but they're looking different because what they were doing before, really now all they're doing is boil waters and you know, looking out for hazards that they didn't know existed, maybe going to around neighborhoods and making sure that there's no health violations in your little makeshift living conditions. Family and individual assistance is definitely one of those things that people suddenly understand and always did right after a disaster. And then it fades. There's so many charts of this. Woo. Just had a disaster, everybody's up here. After a disaster, you can see people's interests go like this. And then local assistance centers, employment centers, all of those things are helping to streamline processes. But these are all part of our social, this is all part of our circle of influence and what we really need to do. Really wanted to get to this one. So your neighborhood is pretty messed up. And you're going back to work now. And you have food and it's okay, but it's not great. And your neighbors are they're just adamant. You live in such a special place and they're gonna rebuild and they have a commitment to this. But then you have to start going to meetings because if you just sit back and let it go, then whoever is the agency is gonna come in and make those decisions, and I hope you enjoy living in your new neighborhood that somebody else has designed for you. So one of the hardest things is that over and over and over again, you're being asked to participate in this, in that, go to a community meeting, comment on this, look at that. There are so many demands on your time in a time and a location that you're already kind of over the edge. It makes it very difficult. So when you look at this, I think the smaller footprint, this was the one that had Katrina. Remember they said, oh, we're gonna have to make New Orleans smaller? You're messing with people's memories and loves and lives at this point. That's a pretty tough thing to do. But if you're at work, you can't go to that meeting. So you'll get a lot of demands for your time. And I hate to say it, but it's one of those things that's just so important. They're gonna overlay green restoration. Oh, well that was fine when you built it in 1956, but when we rebuild it, we're gonna do it with this new standard. And that is totally going to impact you and what you live and what you can choose, and the fact that you can't just go to Home Depot and pull something off the shelf anymore. All of those layers of things get put onto a rebuilding process. And then just some of the other examples. Actually, I thought this one, the one on the far bottom right, that's actually from our regional planning group. And if you go to their website, you can see they actually have these great plans for neighborhoods. The ones that are kind of not walker happy, not biker happy. They have these great plans for kind of making them friendlier and more walkable. And yeah, that's regional planning, Los Angeles County Department of Regional Planning. Yeah, I can't think of what it is. But there's some great stuff in there, and they have ideas about what's going on or what your neighborhood should look like. That's happening now, of course, in a time where I have time maybe to go to a meeting, but that's really gonna happen. Oh, you know what, when we build back this, we should make it more walkable. Because it was really hard before. All of that stuff is going to start to happen, and it's really tough to pay attention to it. So, communities having to accept change is tough. Remember that loud voice, that squeaky, the loudest voice in the room? boy, if they don't want a walkable city, they are going to make sure everybody hears about it. And then you have to get into that, well, is this negative or is this a positive? Do I genuinely don't like it, or I really don't want to change at all? I want exactly what I had back again. Every one of those people, every one of those attitudes will be represented by a person in each of these meetings. And then mental health services haven't really been available all this time, right? They've been off doing the big time, so now they're reestablishing. But instead of, let's just say, 10% of people who could use some help, it's probably a hugely low number, now it's something like 70% of people, and probably 30% of them don't even know that they really are in stressful situations, and they really could use some assistance. So you're dealing with everybody being more sensitive to change and to moving along. And economic recovery. You know, this was transportation, job, housing, healthcare, right? That's the basis. That's the bottom line of what's going on here. That's what you need to have that economic recovery. That's what people are going to be focusing on. I can tell you right now, transportation's a big part of it. And I don't care that you have housing here, it's not on a bus line. And if it's not on a bus line, that means people with damaged housing can't get to their job if you put it over there. We had so many offers in Katrina of housing out in Acton. I was like, thank you so much. I mean, they were saying, you could bring trailers, we'll set things up, we'll take those people here. And we were like, thank you very much, but they can't ever go to work. I don't think there's that much work in Acton. I really don't. So it becomes really important where the housing is and where the jobs are. So getting all of this back, this is what economic recovery is. Maximizing your customer base, reestablishing services, securing the loans is definitely a part of it. The documentation system, let me be the first to tell you. Document, document, document. And I say that in a business sense all the time, but I mean you personally. Document, document, document. Because 12 months from now, somebody's going to go, oh, you know what, we decided we're going to give you a break on your taxes if you spent X much amount on your recovery and you can prove it. Or they're going to come back and say, did you really get that assistance, or how did you spend that? Document everything. You should just keep everything and write it down, even if it's not official receipt. I can't stress that enough. I actually know people who, I worked with an auditor from FEMA, and she used to do individual assistance program. So people were going out, and a lot of times they were replacing like washers and dryers and stuff, and they didn't have a receipt. And do you know how close she had to get to not take away their washers and dryers? I mean, it was ridiculous. There's the washer, it's right there, you can see it. No, you don't have a receipt. So the economic recovery is a big deal, and it's the one that I think that's easiest to understand. Understanding social recovery is a little more difficult because you are reestablishing in a new paradigm. But economic recovery, we all understand what that means, right? We have a means to make money, we have places to spend money, and we have goods that we are trading one way or another. And then, once again, we're just going to talk about that change. Paradigm shifts, huge fundamental changes to your neighborhood, fundamental changes to your next door neighbor. Just really, really different. The Louisiana one, the long-term community recovery one with that arrow, I love that one because it's like, even now, look how far down the arrow they are. It just takes so long to make some of these big changes, and there's really no way about it, or around it, I should say. There's not a lot of ways to get past what you need to do when you're reinventing community, which is what you're doing in a big disaster. So, and then, building resilience, you'll hear that term a lot. Right now, it's a kind of a hot topic. Building resilience and the whole community approach. Those are two of the big issues in emergency management right now. Whole community means, did you take everybody into consideration when you went that direction? Did you talk to your nonprofits? Did you talk to your fully able? Did you talk to your disabled? Did you talk to your seniors? Did you understand what was going to happen to the kids? Did you talk to the various faith agencies? How is this all going to pull together? Because when you come to our neighborhoods, especially in Southern California, one of the coolest things about living down here is it is so diverse. And until you've been to North Dakota for a couple of winters, you haven't seen no diversity. I tell you, that place was very eye-opening to me. I've never been in such a homogenous community as that. But LA, it's not like that. In your neighborhood, you have no idea what your neighbor practices. But you have to respect that when it comes to rebuilding and when it comes to reestablishing your community. You have to understand that they have as much right to live and live prosperously as you do. So change is a big deal. And then this one. Now, what I did bring, and I held it until now, but I have this article. And you could just, yeah, if you want to just pass those around. I'm not supposed to go past the line, so. So the housing on the left here is 1901 earthquake, or 1906, I'm sorry, the earthquake in San Francisco. And that was their housing, their temporary housing. The one on the right, just to show you how about 100 years later we come full circle. That's the newest proposed housing for FEMA trailers. Now, if everybody remembers, the FEMA trailers got a lot of flack because was it formaldehyde or chemicals were building up inside of the trailers, which were newly manufactured, and it was presenting a health hazard. So what would happen before is a neighborhood got damaged to a large extent. They would set up these trailer cities, really, and then residents would have their own trailer. Not ideal, not wonderful, but at least it existed, and people would fight for these trailers. They can't do that anymore. And also, really, trailers? You have to build so much to make them accessible, to make them workable, to ensure safety. It really was never the best solution. So this one is the latest idea about what FEMA should use and how that ought to come around. And I hand out that article just because I just thought it was so interesting. It was from the Chronicle up in San Francisco. But it's just it's a really good explanation of what do we expect when it comes to replacing housing. What are our expectations and what are the problems that we trip over again and again and again in every disaster I've ever worked in where housing's an issue? Housing's an issue. It never goes away because we are particular and we do have our own ways of looking at our lives. So that article I thought would just, kind of for your interest, I think you'll enjoy it. And then of course, you can start here. You know how long it took me to figure out how to make that blink? Just saying. By the time I was getting done, I was getting punchy. But you know, the thing of it is, you got to start somewhere, and you have to start with that preparedness piece. You're going to have Margaret Vinci's going to come and speak to you on that, and she's an amazing speaker who really, really knows the shakeout. She's one of the people that was there when it first got started, and she can really talk to you about what that big earthquake is going to look like in Southern California. I know my neighborhood, we're on fire. I'm going to have a heck of a time moving into Los Angeles from where I am, just based on what we're looking at there. So, you know, take a look at it, understand what that's going to be, and then think about some of these recovery issues and how those two go together. Because the preparedness mind, that we're not even behavioral yet with preparedness. Think how far we are from recovery. We have a great distance to go there.